Welcome to the Naked Lens podcast. I'm Viviana, and buckle up because we're going to be going down trauma lane today. And what I mean by that is that we're going to be talking about common photography struggles, as well as model struggles and common myths that we hear. So I did write a list. I wrote a script this time because there's a lot, and I feel as a yapper, these might turn into rants. So we're going to try and stay on task today. So, number one, you need to narrow down your niche. God, I wish I was not a fucking idiot when I first started my business. Granted, I was 16 and learning how to be a photographer off of WikiHow, but that is not the way. That is not the way. If you're a photographer that's starting out, even if you've been a photographer for a little while, you don't need a specific niche. You don't. I mean, nobody likes a one-trick pony, and in this industry, let's be real, it's constantly changing every week. So you don't need to narrow down your niche. Yes, I did families for a very long time, and I do regret that a tad bit, not from the experience I learned, because obviously you learn a lot, but because I felt like that was the way I needed to be running a business, was to have one specific topic and just stay with that. And now I know that that is not true. You can be doing multiple things, and if you don't want to, then you don't have to. If you want to specialize in weddings, then specialize in weddings. If you want to specialize in family, specialize in families. But at least give yourself the time to experiment with different styles of photography, because ultimately that's how you're going to learn, and that's how you're going to really be able to figure out what type of content you like shooting. If I would have done that, I probably would have been in the fashion and cinematic and editorial side of photography a very long time ago. So you're hearing it from me. If you are starting out or if you are a photographer, do not limit yourself to, or limit your creativity to anything that somebody says you have to. It's not worth it. And yeah, so that's what I have to say to that. Also, that goes for models too. Girl, if somebody tells you you're only good at editorials, or somebody tells you you're only good at like commercial stuff, that I hope you experience multiple styles of picture taking, because it's honestly kind of bullshit if somebody tells you like, oh, you're only good for editorial, or you're only good for, this type of role. Even if you're an actress, don't limit yourself. Shoot a whole bunch of different concepts. You might see yourself in a whole different light and really enjoy it. And then you can be like, oh, I specialize in this. And nobody's going to be mad about that. But at least see yourself in different forms before you narrow yourself down. Going on to number 2, this one is definitely more for photographers, but the more gear you have, the better you are. This is false. There's nothing else to say other than this is false. If you have a shit ton of gear, but you have no idea what to do with it because you haven't trained your eye, it's going to mean nothing. Training your eye is so extremely relevant to being a photographer. It's insane. If you don't know what to do with your eye, you don't know how to use lighting, you don't know how to create concepts, your camera equipment's not going to do anything. And that's just the reality behind it. You might buy the new camera that comes out, but if you have no idea how to use the camera and create sets to bring things to life, there's really no point in having the newest and best camera. So yeah, the amount of gear you have does not limit anything. Like, if you're just starting out and you have a Canon Rebel, just know that I started with a Canon Rebel. And although do not shoot a wedding, your first wedding on it, like I did, but you know what? You learn. You learn and you move on, and then you upgrade. And in this case, I upgraded to a Nikon, and then after a Nikon, I now have my lovely Sony, which nobody can rip out of my hands. So yeah, the more gear you have, then nothing it means. So Um, Getting more onto a serious topic. This one might take a while. A huge hitter for lots of creatives, whether you're a model, a photographer, a filmmaker, it doesn't matter. Dealing with a creative slump is extremely frustrating. Extremely frustrating. And I want to dive more into why this happens, or why I feel like personally it happens for me and maybe other people, and then kind of ways that I get myself out of it, because this one, like, I've been talking to a lot of photographers recently and everybody says they're struggling with concepts and finding that creative spark right now. So, one thing that I feel like really affects the whole slump to happen is constantly shooting back-to-back concepts and always feeling like a pressure to create and post content. So when you feel like you're not, it's feeling like more of a job and not something that you can be creative with. And I had the biggest slump of my life recently. After I went from such a high in New York City and shooting like 2-3 concepts a day, like hella concepts a week, I felt on top of the world. And then I got back to Florida. Well, then I went to Texas. And the slump started to kind of come because I wasn't shooting as many concepts in Texas. But the day I landed off of the plane in New York, I had booked a shoot in Texas. So I did not give myself a break. So the high continued to last. And I think I shot maybe like 5. I think I shot 5 concepts between that week that I was over in Texas. And then I came back here. And then that's when reality really hit. And then once that reality really hit, I felt dead. Like, I literally felt dead for the longest time. This is up to like maybe last week. Like, I was still feeling like complete shit. And I really just like kind of took the time last week to just chill out and think of why I'm feeling this way and let my mind just kind of rest, because I continued to fly, I continued to travel, and it just, although it was distraction, it was not healthy, because I feel like if you're a creative, you have a very overactive mind. And when your mind is constantly like going, but your body is also going, and you don't give yourself that second to like sit and like take in everything that just happened, it is just really overwhelming. And it just causes that like drain of lack of creativity that you once had. Um, so that kind of goes into my next thing of like why I was feeling this sort of paralysis. And it also had to do with like comparing and comparison, which is something that I always say is paralysis. Yeah, if I can talk. Comparison paralysis. So I during this whole slump, I was constantly scrolling through social media because I'm addicted to Instagram and Pinterest. And as I was scrolling through Instagram and Pinterest, I just kept feeling like all of the content that I shot was not good enough. Like, I felt like there were so many things that I could have done better, and that's just something that I've always also held myself to, was like such a high standard, that when I was looking at these other photographers and these other like creators and concepts that I was seeing, I felt like the stuff that I was putting out was just not good enough. And that's a terrible feeling. That, like, feeling like you're not good enough and your work isn't good enough when you put 100% into something, even though you look back at it and you're like, maybe I didn't put 100% into it, is the worst feeling ever. And that just does not help the slump whatsoever. So I finally, like a week ago, took the time to just drop everything and just like sit there and not have my phone and distract myself in other ways that would help the creativity come out. Um, and it's just one of those things where I know it's easier said than done, but if you're comparing yourself um, to others and asking yourself why is somebody else doing this so much better than I am, you're really not going to go anywhere. Talk to people, communicate with people, get an understanding, but comparing is just it's killer. It's going to kill you. It's one of those things that you look at and it's human, and although some of you might feel like you get the best inspo from things that you see that other people have done, you really don't, because you're not getting the creativity from yourself. You're just stealing concepts, quote unquote, or recreating concepts that have already been done. And I'm not saying that everything you do has to be not done before or an original idea or concept, but you have to figure out a way to like make it your own, and understanding that is definitely one way to like start the brainstorming again after a slump. So another reason why this slump kind of like happens is failing. Sometimes we just don't like start at all because we're afraid that the final result is going to be terrible or not what we envisioned. And that was something that I struggled with a lot. I would come up with these concepts and then I'd be like, okay, but like, how are we doing that? How am I doing that? And then I would get into these like moods of just being like, well, whatever I do, whatever I create is just not going to be good enough anyway. So I'm not even going to try and do it. Girl. I don't know who did that. I don't know who possessed me to think that way. I never thought that way. But again, I was like at a low. And if you're at a low right now, just know it does get better. You will get your spark back. And I'm gonna tell you how. I'm gonna tell you how. And if you haven't experienced this before, you're amazing. I hope you don't experience this ever because it sucks. But the feeling of failing and such a low of like a final result expectation is just it's not a reality no matter what you do. And maybe it comes from me being a perfectionist, but whatever you do, you can make the best. You can't go into something with a negative mindset, and I've never done that before. I hate going into something with negative mindsets. And so when I started feeling this way, I really had to like sit myself down and just like completely take myself away from the world for a second, because I was like, this is not who I am. I don't know why I'm feeling like this. Why am I feeling like this? And it really just stems from being a perfectionist and wanting everything to be perfect. But in reality, like, who is defining perfect, especially when it comes to art? I know y'all have seen some crazy ass art pieces for sale, and you've been like, okay, like, that's perfect for you, $30,000 on that splatter of paint. So who is to define your work? Who are you to even define your work? Funny story. If you've seen my most recent Instagram post, it was this girl on a subway. I took those photos, I went home, I downloaded them, I did not touch them. I looked at them, and I was like, I hate this. I could have done so much better. There were so many different angles that I could have done. There were so many different settings I could have used, or lighting techniques, and I didn't. And that wasn't really my style. I say that. But I feel like it was definitely more out of my comfort zone than what I was originally doing or planned on doing. So I looked at these images, and I just didn't touch them. I didn't touch them until I got back I started editing them last week. So I actually edited them the same day that I posted them because I was just like, I need to post something, which was another block. I wasn't posting anything because I was like, none of the stuff I've created that I like. So I would just go through my Lightroom. I have maybe like 15 or 16 shoots that I haven't posted just because I feel like I could have done better. And I sat there and I was like, you know what? I went with a different mindset. I changed the way I was editing and I was able to post them. And I posted them. They still weren't my favorite, but somebody texted me and they said, "This is quite literally the best work that you've put out." And I was sitting there and I was like, I hated those photos. I hated those photos, but to somebody else, they were their favorite photos that I've posted or that they've seen. And then a lot of you started commenting on it. And then a lot of you started messaging me and DMing me saying that this was such a cool concept. You loved the way they came out. And that was just a realization moment, like, holy fuck. Like, I was gatekeeping those photos for a minute because I just didn't like them. And I didn't think they were going to go anywhere. But to you guys liked them. And I feel like that's just another reason why being a perfectionist or judging your own work is not going to help you or do anything for you, because people see the value. People see the value in your work. People see the value in the stuff that you're putting out. And although you might not see it right now, it's probably really good. So just post it, just edit it, just take the photo, and you can't control everything. You can't control everything, and I had a problem with that, and I still have a problem with that, but realistically, you can't control everything. Not everybody's gonna like it, and to some people, it might be the best thing that you've ever done. So there is no failing in art, and yeah, there's just no failing in art. And who says you can't experiment? So yeah, moving on to the next. So now that I've kind of gone over, like, now that I've kind of been, like, bringing everybody's trauma back to life or what they're feeling to light, you're probably like, okay, so, like, how do I fix it? Like, thank you for bringing my trauma back, and that was disrespectful, but how am I going to fix it? And I'm going to tell you, I promise, I'm not mean, but for me, for the first thing that I do is changing my creative input. You have to remember that creativity does not exist in a vacuum. So if you're only consuming photography, you're limiting yourself. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're constantly, like I said before, scrolling through social media, checking out people's accounts, scrolling through Pinterest. I would scroll through Pinterest hours and hours and hours a day. I still do, but I love Pinterest, so, like, you can't blame me. But if you're only consuming photography, you are really limiting yourself. You need to be looking outside of photography. And it was funny because I was thinking of, like, ways that you can search outside of photography and, like, putting it into an example for you guys. And the thing that I kind of, like, stuck with was reminiscing when, like, you're learning in school and your teacher would play a movie, and then all of a sudden you were, like, more slightly interested in learning because you were doing something different but still on the same task. So with that, if you're tired of thinking and you're tired of trying to learn and tired of scrolling of endless feed, just relax. Just relax and take a second. Honestly, I have been really liking watching movies, whether they're old movies or they're childhood movies, and kind of just, like, paying attention to the certain scenes that captured my attention. And then, like, that would spark a concept or a shoot maybe. So looking at the way people are framing them, or, like, framing these scenes, or thinking to yourself, like, why is this captivating your attention so much, and then kind of just, like, harnessing that and then putting that into photography. I think it just allows for that different type of perspective with also, like, incorporating photography and film into your everyday, but not pressuring yourself to think a certain way. Um, Another one for me, honestly, is visiting an art museum or even walking around like a new town or a new part of town. I just feel like you're seeing so many new things that you might not have seen before. And when you're doing this, put your phone away. Put it on do not disturb. Do not even like look at your phone. I was going to school to be a fine art major, and so for me, going to a museum and looking at these different ideas and concepts and feelings and just really just like sitting and staring at a painting just does it for me. It might not do it for everybody because you might be like, that sounds like the most boring thing ever. But for me, I like being able to go and stare at something and just even like 20 minutes just in one section, just looking at the level of details that people are putting into stuff and just altering your brain to think differently. And I find that this also worked when you would go into like, or when I would go into a museum, or maybe you've been in a museum before and you see like just the splatters of paint on a canvas and you're just like, what the hell am I looking at? I liked those. There was also this painting in Amsterdam. Yeah, it was in Amsterdam. It was a plain painting. It was just blue. Literally an entire canvas just of blue. And I just stood there looking into this blue painting that had nothing on it. And somehow that was my favorite one. Because as you're staring into this, you're realizing like the depth and the like the color and just being able to appreciate it in a different light than just like walking past it and being like, well, why is this just a blue canvas? Like, why is it even in here? So really just taking the time to open your mind to new things that you might not have liked or you just don't see the point of can help unlock another part of your brain that can help you with concepts or ideas or just thinking differently. Another one for me is vintage stores. If I go into vintage stores a lot, I love a good vintage store. I love a good vintage shop. This is where I see like all of the old newspaper prints and magazines, and if you just like sit there and start flipping through all of the magazines, you'll be surprised by how many concepts and different like ideas pop to your head. If you don't like the vintage look or the vintage aesthetic, you can find another magazine, or maybe even go to a bookstore or a comic store if you're into that type of photography. Because if you look at a comic book, let's say you're a street photographer and you're looking at these images of a city landscape, that can help you. Like, that can help you see buildings in different lights and different angles that you might want to bring to your photography when you go back out and shoot. So just trying new things and finding new ways to step away from photography, but also like combining it, can really help you. Another thing that can help is just stepping away from your camera. It takes a second to just reset fully. So don't force yourself to shoot. If you're forcing yourself to shoot and create content, it's not going to come out the way you want it to. And that's just the reality of it. Like, if you're forcing yourself to go shoot a concept that you're not really passionate about, you haven't put any thought into, it's just not going to work. And you really just have to give yourself a second to do nothing, and maybe even take a break off of posting on social media, maybe post a few reels instead, but just take a second to fully step away, because the best ideas come to you when you're not looking. And I feel like I learned that from whenever you lose something and you're like constantly looking and looking and looking for it and you can't find it, and then all of a sudden you stop looking for it and then it just shows up. Like, that's the exact same thing that happens with your brain. And you have to like think that way. Like if I'm doing nothing, I was actually sitting out there tanning the other day and I had the best idea come to my head in a really long time. And now I'm playing the entire concept. So just taking a second to step away from your camera and not look for something to shoot will allow for your brain to come up with something. And you cannot force yourself to just start thinking and forcing yourself to try and create things. You need to give yourself a second just to breathe and to kind of go back to the basics. And then instead of like, fighting being in a slump, just recognize that it is a part of the process and find it beautiful, because knowing and being aware that your creativity is gone is honestly beautiful, because when it comes back, you'll feel so much better and you'll understand just how much or how big of a part creativity and your brain is a part of your life. So, okay, now moving on to something that is a little bit more relatable for photographers and models, and that is being ghosted. If you have not been ghosted as a photographer or a model, please take the microphone from me and you can start talking and teaching, because I just feel like there's so many occasions where ghosting still happens, and although I have been able to limit it quite a lot, I still feel like it does happen and it's just a natural part of the process. I will say that in order for me to kind of stop this ghosting from happening, I've done a lot of phone calls, and on the phone calls with my clients, I really just sell my personality and how much I'm genuinely there for them and not just money grabbing. I feel like a lot of clients feel like when they see people's prices, especially photographers, they obviously don't go through the whole process of creativity and bringing things to life and yada yada. So when they see the price, it's like they're stealing my money. Like this is quite literally highway robbery. When we as photographers and models know that it is not, we are priced very appropriately for what we are doing, and we just have to let them know that. So sending them a text message as soon as they send their inquiry in, I send them a text message. I give them my energy and my personality so they get to kind of feel of my energy. And then from there, I'll always ask them to hop on a quick call with me. And almost 99% of the time when I hop on a call with a client, they are sending me their down payment right after I get off the phone. Um, I feel like this is just such a strong way to connect with your client, show that you care for them, and really just kind of like seal the deal. So, my best recommendation to you is to sell your personality, get them on the phone, and really just let them know that you're there for them and you're not stealing their money. um, so, a big hitter for models, I'm going to get more into model stuff, is rejection and competition. Um, Everybody knows that this industry is extremely highly competitive, and there's always constant casting calls and auditions happening. So you go to a casting call, you go to an audition, and there's hella people there. Or in for my case at least, when I post a casting call or a model call, I get like 40 to 50 messages or likes on the story, and there's a lot of you. So ways to make you stand out and stuff during these is just really, again, selling your personality. I will go through everybody's profile on social media. I will see who you're active with, who you're following, if we have any mutuals, how dedicated you are to the art, and just kind of go from there. So if you're constantly popping up on my feed, if I'm constantly seeing your name, not just for the model call, but liking my posts, commenting, um, talking to me at just basic conversations, not even about photography, I mean, ultimately those are the people that are winning, and they're getting my bookings at least. And I know for a lot of other people that they also view it like that as well. Like if you're constantly showing up and you're constantly being there and being active, they're going to go with you. And might sound kind of rude to say, but like that's just how the industry works. Yes, it's competitive, and yes, rejection is a frequent experience with models, but if you're selling your personality, if you're going out and talking and being a yapper and being outside of your element and showing how much you truly are dedicated to your art, it's gonna work out. Everything's gonna work out for you. Um, Another hard thing for models that I've dealt with is body image and beauty standards. We all joke around with this like Bella Hadid look, but it's real. I'm sorry. Um, nobody is pressuring you to look like Bella Hadid. We all love Bella Hadid. Don't like you can't even say you don't like Bella Hadid. And if you don't like Bella Hadid, you're mad. You're just mad. That's all I have to say. But this pressure to maintain specific body measurements or fit a certain beauty standard always leads to like that lack of self-confidence and self-worth, and the industry has changed so much that it doesn't matter what you look like. To an extent, it's how much you're putting into your work. If you are a top model and you're putting 100% into your work, nobody's going to care that you have a freckle above your eyebrow or if you gained a pound since the last time somebody shot with you. Nobody's going to care about that because they know your worth, you know your worth, and if you come up confident, hot, that's all that matters. That is literally all that matters. So don't compare yourself to other people. You are you. And honestly, like as a photographer, I look for whoever fits my concept and whoever I know, again, is going to put themselves out there, show up 100%, and really just work. So yeah, and trends are always changing. So it's difficult to keep up with like ideal looks. Like editorial might be trending for one and you're like, well, I don't look like I can't do editorial. I'm sure you can do editorial, but the trends are changing. So it doesn't matter what you look like or what you feel like you look like. You're going to be perfect for somebody's concept, and it's really just selling yourself and getting yourself out there that is going to affect whether you get the booking or you don't. Oh boy. This is a big problem for me, and I feel like for a lot of models you've dealt with this, but safety concerns. We all know that, you know, there's some photographers out there doing unethical things, and that is really scary, honestly. I don't even know how to go about this. As a photographer, I try my best to be very ethical with my clients and very straightforward with what I'm looking for with my concepts. For example, I posted a model call for a horse photo shoot the other day, and I had models message me. I chose my top 3 models that I thought fit the vibe. I messaged them very specifically. Are you okay with your shirt off? Are you okay being around horses? Are you okay with this? Are you okay with that? I go down an entire list so they know what to expect when doing this photo shoot with me. If they say they're uncomfortable in any way, that's perfectly fine. We do another concept, or I choose another person. That's just how it works. I'm not going to pressure you to do something you don't want to do. I hope nobody ever pressures you to do something that you don't want to do. And if they do, let me know. Let me know, because we ride it on. I just feel like being a model, there's a lot of people that don't kind of tell you what their plans are. I'm not calling out the male photographers. But there are quite a few photographers that I've seen or that I've heard of that are very I don't even know what to say. I don't even know how to professionally say that. But they're not a vibe. Let's just say they're not a vibe. They're not a vibe, and as a model, you have to be aware of who you're working with and what you're going to be doing. I think the best way to do this is personally contracts for models, especially just being careful with the world that we live in. Having that contract written out saying, I do not do, nude photo shoots, I do not do boudoir, or I'm only comfortable with this, I'm only comfortable with that. That's perfectly fine, and that protects you as a model, and I don't think there's any shame in laying that flat out for whoever you're working with. So yeah, I think that's a huge problem and a huge struggle for models, and I feel like you guys also might feel like you have to be doing, nude, boudoir, maybe even like little clothes. You don't have to. You don't have to be that type of model, so don't let anybody pressure you, and you don't have to do that in order to be seen in the industry. I promise you, you do not have to do that in order to be seen in the industry. So do not feel like you have to, especially if you're young and you're experimenting. You do not have to whatsoever. So yeah, look at your photographer's content. Maybe ask around if anybody shot with the photographer before, because you never know. You never know what you're getting into. That also ties into my next struggle that I've seen happen firsthand and was going to make me catch a case. Lack of respect on set. So some models, if you're a model, you've definitely experienced disrespectful treatment, including like being ignored or being dismissed or spoken to unprofessionally. Don't even let that happen. If you're working with somebody who is flat out just like rude, I'd say something. I mean, I know you might think that it's unprofessional, but you need to stick up for yourself. And it's not acceptable whatsoever, whether you're on set or not on set or just with somebody. A lot of, I will say, like, it is kind of hard. I know for photographers and like directors and stuff, you kind of get into this zone and this mindset and you kind of just like forget. But I feel like there's definitely levels of what a human can take, and being socially aware. Like, if you're not socially aware and you're dismissing your models and you're making them uncomfortable and you're not considering models' comfort levels when they're working, that is just a very poor reflection on you. So consider your models' comfort levels. Ask them questions before, after, during any shoot. Always ask if somebody's comfortable. I always say, like, especially when posing, I will go down and I will pose for them. I'm not expecting everybody to go down and pose with your models, but I go down, I do the pose, I study the poses, I learn the poses myself, I figure out what's comfortable for me, what's comfortable for them, and if it's not comfortable for them, great, we move on. I'm not going to force you to do a pose that you're not comfortable with, especially if it's, includes something exaggerate like climbing a fence, jumping, posing in a certain way. It doesn't matter what it is. Always ask them, and if you're a model, I know you've probably been in some uncomfortable situations and positions, and it is okay to say no or say that I am uncomfortable. I do not feel like doing that. And yeah, that's how I say helping that. It does not lower your worth ethic or your quality or put any bad like thing on your name. It doesn't, and just do it because you don't want to be uncomfortable in the space where you're supposed to be creative and feel the most beautiful and yourself. Another one is diversity inclusion. I feel like a lot of progress is being made in the industry. Like, when you looked at Victoria's Secret models then and you look at Victoria's Secret models now, there's definitely a lot more diversity. And while the progress is being made, I feel like there is some like struggles with underrepresentation or being typecast by like your race or the way you might look or dress or your age. But again, there's different roles for everybody, and if you see something, say something, because that's the only way everybody's gonna grow and bring some terrible people to light, which don't be afraid to name drop. But yeah, these are just a few things I've learned while working in the industry, and I definitely want to dive more into this with a model because I want you to hear firsthand from a model. And I also want to hear firsthand from a model how they feel about these topics. So I'm definitely going to be doing that. So stay tuned. But as of now, I hope you had some light from my trauma and I was able to help you a bit with some of these struggles. My DMs are always open, so feel free to call me or contact me. Um, I've talked to a lot of photographers recently, and it seems like everybody was struggling to find concepts. So, next week, I'm going to go over how I find concepts and what I do to kind of spark a shoot and bring it to life. So, yeah, I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.